August 14, 2023 Super 200 Master Exam 80. The term impounds refers to, what is reserves? Impounds are monies set aside, reserves, to cover future payments of recurring costs such as taxes and insurance. Of indefinite duration is a characteristic which is particularly descriptive of what is a state of inheritance. Fee simple estate, also referred to as an estate of inheritance. A fee simple estate is one type of freehold estate, and as such, is indefinite in duration. A fee simple estate can also be sold or inherited, and is not free of encumbrances. A fee simple absolute is the most interest that one can hold in land. Broker Frankel with Armand Real Estate Company listed a property for a seller. Broker Uter, with his real estate company, called Broker Frankel and disclosed that he was a buyer's agent. Broker Uter wrote a contract with his buyer for the sale of the property. What, if any, is the relationship between the buyer's broker, the seller and the listing broker? What is there is not a relationship between the parties. Broker Frankel represents the seller and Broker Uter represents the buyer. Since each broker represents separate sides in the transaction, no relationship exists. The most important test of a fixture is, what is intention of the parties? The intention of the parties, particularly the intention of the person attaching the fixture, is the most important element of determining whether or not an item is a fixture. If a seller has listed an attached basketball hoop as an exception in the sale and purchase contract, the seller will get to keep the item regardless of its method of attachment or adaptability because the seller's intention is to keep the basketball hoop. A bearing wall in a home is usually left intact during remodeling. Usually includes stronger members than other interior walls may be constructed at any angle to a doorway. All of the other options are correct. What is all of the other options are correct? Bearing wall is a wall supporting any load in the vertical plane as well as its own weight. It is important in remodeling because it is the strongest member and is built at any angles to doors and windows. Which of the following does not need to be disclosed on the real property transfer disclosure form? Repairs that comply with building code, recorded easements, fences shared with a neighbor, CCRs. What is not needed is repairs that comply with building code. Transfer disclosure statement is required of the seller even if sold as is for sale of a 4-unit residential building. If the TDS is amended, the buyer has 3 days to rescind out of the contract. If the TDS is defective, the buyer has 2 years to sue the seller. The seller should reveal all known defects but not repairs that are up to building code on the TDS. The licensee can never complete the seller's portion of the TDS. When a real estate broker misrepresents a property to a buyer while acting as an agent, he may be subject to what is disciplined by the real estate commissioner, civil lawsuits and criminal action. Misrepresentation by a licensee will subject that licensee not only to disciplinary action, but potential civil and criminal suits as well. A landlord sold an apartment building so that a freeway can be built. The tenant's lease has expired, but the landlord permits him to stay in the apartment until the building is torn down. The tenant continues to pay the rent as prescribed in the lease. What kind of tenancy does the tenant have? What is periodic tenancy? Note without an end date. When a tenant stays on after a lease expires and continues to pay rent, and the rent is accepted by the landlord, it is generally assumed that the tenant will continue on the same terms as the lease. Rent is still considered due at the same time as under the lease agreement, but without a formal lease that has an end date, it is now considered a periodic tenancy. Note, this is not the same as a holdover tenancy in which the landlord has requested that the tenant vacate the property. The right to use property by the giving of an easement creates, what is an encumbrance? Note, giving an easement equals encumbrance. An encumbrance is a right to, interest in, or legal liability on real property that does not prohibit passing title to the property but that may diminish its value. Encumbrances can be classified in several ways. They may be financial, for example, liens, or non-financial, for example, easements. Private restrictions. 2 brokers decide to list a property together and agree to split the commission 50-50. One broker finds the buyer and then refuses to share the commission. In an occurrence like this, an action could be filed. What is in a civil court? Note, broker refuses to share equals civil court. If a broker agreed to share a commission with another broker and then refused to pay the other broker, the unpaid broker could file an action in a civil court. Which of the following statements concerning a life estate is false? What is false is a life estate can never extend beyond the life of the life tenant. It can, in common law and statutory law, a life estate is the ownership of land for the duration of a person's life. In legal terms, it is an estate in real property that aims at death when ownership of the property may revert to the original owner or is passed to a designated remainderman. With a life estate per autovai, however, the length of the life tenancy is based on someone else's life, so if the life tenant dies before the measuring life, the estate could extend beyond the life of the life tenant. Jerry Smith is a broker who has been found guilty of violating the Unruh Act. What penalty or penalties is he subject to? What is payment of exemplary damages to the victim and payment to the victim for actual damages he or she incurred, in addition to actual and exemplary, or punitive, damages? Jerry may also be ordered to pay emotional damages and served with a cease and desist order. An aggrieved party with a fair housing violation claim has how long to file a complaint with the Department of Housing and Urban Development? What is 1 year? If the complaint is not filed within 1 year, a person may still file a civil suit in a federal court. When the owner of a property believes that her property has been overassessed by the county assessor, she should contact the Assessment Appeals Board. If a buyer or any other property owner felt that his property has been overassessed, he can make an appeal to the Assessment Appeals Board. Which of the following factors are not considered a cause of obsolescence? What is wear and tear? Wear and tear from use is not obsolescence, it is physical deterioration. When processing a real estate loan application, a lender would correlate the characteristics of a borrower, loan and property to make. What is a loan commitment? In determining whether or not to make a loan commitment, a lender will examine the borrower's income, their character and the property. Legally speaking, an attachment is. What is a lien? An attachment is considered a lien. Lien is a monetary encumbrance, meaning you owe money. Whenever you see the word lien, think of money. The other options do not involve money. Note, one of the legal tests of a fixture is method of attachment. This question is asking what is considered to be an attachment, and legally speaking a lien would be an attachment. Jerry is selling his 16-unit apartment building. The buyer asks Jerry for tenant confirmation of the terms of the rental agreement, like the amount of rent, the amount of security deposit and the expiration of the agreement for each occupied unit. The tenants would most likely be providing. What is an estoppel statement? An estoppel statement is used to inform a potential buyer of commercial or residential rental property of the rights and privileges of existing tenants. The estoppel certificate requests information about rental amount, lease terms, protected tenancy status, oral agreements with the landlord, amendments to written lease agreements, promises made by the landlord, and agreements with respect to the payment of utilities, for example water and gas. In short, the estoppel agreement is meant to completely describe the nature of the relationship between the landlord and tenant. The goal is to put any prospective buyers of the rental property on notice regarding the rights and privileges that the existing tenants enjoy. Which of the following items is often short-rated? What is premiums on an insurance policy? When a casualty insurance policy is cancelled prior to expiration, the insurance company normally assigns a short rate factor to the refund. A title company could make a title search by searching the records of the county recorder's, Federal Land and County Clerk's Office. A title search is a review of all recorded documents affecting a specific piece of property to determine the present condition of title. A standard title insurance policy insures against what is a recorded deed in the chain of title that was not properly delivered. Standard policy of title insurance protects against forgery and improper delivery. However, it does not include a survey or on-site inspection. Tammy was told that she was not allowed to live in Dickerville because people of her ethnic background are not welcome there. Whom should she complain to? What is Department of Fair Employment and Housing? Department of Fair Employment Housing is set up to receive discrimination complaints. Homeowner Jenny acquired the ownership of land that was deposited by a river running through her property by. What is accretion? Accretion means the addition to a parcel of land by sand or soil deposits due to the action of a river or other body of water over time. Avulsion refers to the loss of land as a result of its being washed away by sudden or unexpected action of nature, such as a flash flood that reroutes a river. Which of the following is required to operate as an advance fee rental agent? What is a written contract with prospective tenants? An advance fee rental agent collects a fee in advance from prospective tenants to find them suitable rental properties. An advance fee rental agent must have a prepaid rental listing service license, PRLS. If the rental agent is a licensed broker, they are exempt from the requirement to have a PRLS license. PRLS contracts must be in writing and approved by the real estate commissioner. Note, this question asks which option is required. While having a real estate broker's license allows a person to operate as an advance fee rental agent, it is not required because someone can have a PRLS license instead. Ivan represents the Sparks who are selling their property. Which of the following actions must Ivan take when prospective buyers ask to see the property? What is inform them in writing that she represents the seller's interests? Ivan must disclose in writing that she represents the seller. The disclosure is necessary so that the buyer understands he or she is not being represented by the seller's agent. A buyer taking title subject to a mortgage should request a what is reduction certificate. A reduction certificate is a document signed by a lender stating the outstanding amount on a mortgage loan. What is the gross rent multiplier formula? What is the sale price of a property divided by its gross rental income? Here's the formula to calculate a gross rent multiplier. Gross rent multiplier equals price, gross annual rental income. Example, $500,000 property price, $42,000 gross annual rent equals 11.9 GRM. This can be done with annual or monthly figures. However, annual is more common. Which of the following represents one of the essentials of a grant deed? What is parties capable of receiving the grant? There are several essentials to a valid deed, namely, 1. It must be in writing. 2. The parties must be properly described. 3. The parties must be competent to convey. 4. Be capable of receiving the grant. 5. The property conveyed must be adequately described. 6. There must be a granting clause, operative words or conveyance, I hereby grant. 7. The deed must be signed by the party or parties making the conveyance or grant. 8. Delivery and acceptance is required. Note, this is not the same as offer and acceptance. Meeting of the minds. Which of the following rights of ownership in real property do individuals normally not have? What is eminent domain rights? Eminent domain is when the property is taken by the government because it is necessary for necessary public use. The owner of the private property taken receives just compensation through a process called condemnation. Eminent domain is usually not held by individuals. Who is responsible for disclosing a Melrose tax to the buyer? What is seller? Melrose taxes must be disclosed by the seller. Susan is an agent who represents the buyer exclusively. What may Susan do? What is present offers to the seller or to a seller's agent? An agent who represents the buyer exclusively may present an offer to the seller, if there is no agent, or to the seller's agent. A square is 1/8 of a mile by 1/8 of a mile. How many acres is this? What is 10 acres? 1/8 of a mile square is the same as 10 acres. Multiply 1/8 mile, x 1/8 mile, equals 1/64 square mile, multiplied by 640 acres, 1 square mile, equals 10 acres.